We are back. So we were talking about the destruction of societies, and we're going to get into some of these organizations. Miss Bombshell, Flume, everyone is back. All right, so we've got here example of such forces: heat out by the sun, volcanic eruption. Scott's here, beautiful. We've got here changes in orientation of the Earth's axis, which we know. We know about the fluctuations between perihelion and aphelion in terms of when the orbit of the Earth flicks between going more elliptical and more circular. We've got change in distribution of land and ocean over the face of the Earth. So you're talking about a huge amount of variables that all contribute to climate change that's not to do with humans, and that's separate to the climate change that has been, I guess, in existence due to human activity. All right. Changes in orientation of the Earth. Okay, we've said that frequently natural climate change, the advance of retreat. All right, so the advance and retreat of continental ice sheets during ice ages, beginning over 2 million years ago. We had a little ice age between 1400 and 1800 AD, and the global cooling following the enormous humans are the problem. I don't think the book is saying that, no, but in general, humans are both the problem and the solution. But we're talking about societal collapse and all of the factors, all of them that could be involved. And what we're looking at in this book is many, many, many different societies that have both collapsed and failed, seeing what they have in common and what they don't have in common to help eliminate the variables that contribute or don't contribute to what's going on. That's pretty much what we're talking about. All right, so where were we? We were talking about the global cooling, the enormous volcanic eruption of Indonesia's Mount Tambora on April 5th, 1815. There was a massive global cooling after that, of course, because a lot of the sun was blocked out for a long time. That eruption injected so much dust into the upper atmosphere that the amount of sunlight reaching the ground decreased until the dust settled, causing widespread famines, even in North America and Europe back in the 1800s due to cold temperatures and reduced crop yields in the summer of 1816. That was called the year without summer in Europe and North America. Climate change was even more of a problem for past societies with short human lifespans and without writing than, of course, today, where we can track records, we can live a bit longer, we can see variances, we can see what things have and don't have effects, variables, etc. Many parts of the world tends to vary not just from year to year, but also on a multi-decade timescale, of course. Yeah, like several wet decades followed by a dry half century. Right? In many prehistoric societies, the mean human generation time was only a few decades. That's pretty crazy. Hence, towards the end of a string of wet decades, most people alive had no first-hand memory of the previous period of a dry climate. And if you don't have writing, which has come only in the last fraction of humanity, right? The Sumerians invented the concept of writing in 3000 BC. Yeah. So it was a massive gap. If humans have been around for at least 150 to 250,000 years, that's a long time where humans didn't really do anything except pass down oral tradition. But there are some societies in modern day Alaska that have been traditionally oral societies. Not a dirty joke. And they have passed down stuff that's pretty damn accurate. They have flood stories which are almost identical to the books of Genesis, even down to the raven and the dove, even though they only used oral traditions, which is quite amazing. Liran is here, Miss Bombshell is here. All right, so now we're going to say even today there is a human tendency to increase production and population during good decades, of course, hello, forgetting that such decades were unlikely to last. Cashing in on climate scams for centuries. Okay. Clearly an intelligent person right there. Forgetting, blah, blah, blah. When the good decades then do end, the society finds itself with more population than can be supported. Where are we here? Yeah, that's completely natural. That's what humans do. It's like also with the expansion and contraction of empires. We had, for example, the first lot of Western civilization ended in about 1186 BC. They were the first major superpowers, and that was in modern day Middle East, but it wasn't the Arabs because the Arabs weren't there at that time. It was basically my ancestors, the Semitic types of people, and no, way before the Ottoman, way before. Ottomans basically were descendants of the Hittites who were in modern day Anatolia, Turkey, but they were all Semitic style people. basically, there are still some left. I think there are some on this scope, actually. I think A is one of them, Liran is one, and I'm one. So there's three of us here. All right. So in today's society, most of them are either Christian, secular, atheist, Armenian, Syriac, Chaldean, Jacobite. You probably haven't heard of most of them. Maronites, Hebrew. I think Hebrew are the most famous out of all of them. So those superpowers developed writing. They developed the wheel. Possibly. Khazars, yeah. You know your stuff, my friend. Yeah. So they ended all at once at about 1186 to 1185 BC. And it was a combination of overproduction during a good period, but then they had earthquakes and they had famine both at the same time, plus the original invasion of the Sea Peoples, I think it was. Cyanide is back, the sapiosexual. Alrighty, where were we? I got thrown off. I just got a tweet from one of my awesome GoFundMe supporters. All right, hence what the industry. Yes, and so people overproduce, and then of course in the period of contraction, right? When the society can no longer sustain that amount of population, it collapses. And we keep doing that as humans, right? Like for example, the US is a perfect example of that. They thought that they were further ahead in race relations than they actually are. And so we now have this, well, that's one of the reasons I would submit that we start to have these issues, right? Okay, so in many prehistoric societies, the mean human, blah, blah, blah. All right, even today, as we said, which is what I was just saying, that's funny. When the good decades then do end, society finds itself with more population that can be supported. That's exactly what happens, or with ingrained habits unsuitable to the new climate conditions. Right? So for example, the rise of China makes it very difficult for the working class in America, and they either rightly or wrongly voted in a certain direction. And these are things that happen when societies aren't ready. So the dry US West and its urban or rural policies of profligate water usage, which is quite interesting. And we had that problem in California because these are things that evolved from humans that grew up in a wetter society. And even now in Australia, we're having the dry season because of what we call the Southern Oscillation Index. And every 7 to 14 years, we have an El Nino La Nina effect. And in Australia, it results in a dry season for 7 to 10 years and then a wet season. So our winter, you guys would have seen my scopes on Gabsmacked. This is called Diamond. It's written by Diamond and Gamage, 2005, How Societies Choose Failure or Success. It's a really good book. I've been reading it for a while, but it's so long that I can't share it all with you. I'm selecting the best bits just to share with you guys. But it's fascinating how what they've done is they found societies are almost identical in different locations, and they found societies that are almost completely different in very similar locations, and trying to, via the process of elimination and via hypotheses of contributing factors to collapse or success, figure out a model for success for future societies. And some of the things that it touches on are some of the things I bring up when I talk about what's happening in America and why my predictions sometimes are pretty damn spot on. I get a lot of help. Okay, so we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people here for some reason, even though it says 8. Very strange. All right, so compounding these problems of climate change, many past societies didn't have disaster relief mechanisms. So we saw what happened under the Bush administration with, was it New Orleans? Hurricane Katrina. And we saw that the society was not well equipped at all for the disaster relief. Whereas if you look at a society such as Holland, well, before it started to collapse as it is now on their PC Mac. Oh, okay, cool. There you go. Liran, the tech genius. You notice, for example, that because of the situation they were in, they were forced to rebuild land because they didn't have any, right? They had to actually expand the country, I think by 2/3 or something, wasn't it? And so to do that, they were able, hey, Bayous and Byron is back. So they had to build dikes that could support the country against storms that would come only once every 10,000 years, whereas Hurricane Katrina was a type of storm that comes only once every 100 years. So it shows you that the US in some situations is unbelievably backwards, right? But that's because, well, willful blindness and other things we won't get into. In particular societies, they may benefit one society whilst hurting another society. Dykes are very supportive. I was waiting for something's going to come good from one of you. Flume, man. Man, Flume, you should be a stand-up comedian. You should go to do some mic nights. I'm not even joking about that. For example, we shall see that the Little Ice Age was bad for the Greenland Norse, but good for the Greenland Inuit. The Greenland Norse, right? I'm thinking of talking about that with you guys because the Greenland Norse ate each other alive, exactly like what's happening in the US now. And if US citizens in general had a degree of education as opposed to inculcation and indoctrination, we perhaps might have more people that are aware that they're repeating the same mistakes. I'm calling the FBI, you're a serial killer. All right, that's hilarious. All right, in many historical cases, a society that was depleting its environmental resources could absorb the losses as long as the climate was benign. Perfect example, the housing crisis in the US. People kept borrowing and borrowing because houses were going up in price. The problem is they were eating into a bubble for the last 5 days. Why? Oh my God. Don't tell me. The Gap Smack brush off. This is how it works, my friends. You feel rather hopeless. My dear, how in the hell and why are you... I find this trend amongst people who appear to have the least reason. Our country is shit. Your country is shit. But you can make it better. You know, you can make it better again. Maybe. You know? Yeah, Sprinkles and Booze, go live. Go for it, my dear. It's a shame I don't get to talk to you as much. I notice when you're at your worst, you jump in and we have our good chats. We should have some Skype chats because then we can have a pretty good damn argument. But I'm hormonal. Yeah. Oh, look, it's okay. You know, it'll recover. Maybe not in its current form. But the idea of freedom, the West, and enlightenment, whether we like it or not, when comparing to other countries, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, where would you rather live, in communist China? Yeah. You know, would you rather be in Lebanon, the most beautiful place in the world, but you can't get a job if you're black or if you're not, you know, if you're not the right religion? I mean, yeah, it's... all right. In many historical cases, a society that was depleting its environmental resources could absorb the losses, blah, blah, blah. It's very true. I'm not feeling support with my great country. Well, look, it's been happening for quite a while. Australia's pretty damn awesome. This is true. Sexually active. Textually active. Yeah. You know, I spoke about this on one of my other scopes. You think you know it all. I believe that's called projecting, Mr. Blockmaho. But, you know, not bad for a cliche line. You're getting slightly better. But was then driver, brinker, collapse, blah, 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 colder, hotter, wetter, more variable. I love trolls, man. I miss them. We don't get enough. It has been, but at least there wasn't a dictator in office. Well, that one I was talking about today, actually, on the race relations. The dictator, it happens throughout the whole world. The more you have identity politics and the inability for opposing ideological viewpoints to have a conversation, the solution is the rise of a dictator. It happens everywhere, every time. We have, today, we have Bashar al-Assad in Syria. We have Duterte in the Philippines. You have Trump in the US. So I don't blame Trump at all, or the supporters. It's completely natural when those on our side, on the left, stop talking to those on the right, and we want to impose will by force. Doesn't make it easier. Venezuela, yeah, that's even worse. But it's a bit different in Venezuela because you have the whole society moving against the government, as opposed to America, which is a fragmentation of the society. In many historical cases, a society that was depleting its environmental resource could absorb the losses. I blame white people for everything bad. Well, that's a genius move, my friend. I literally feel like I'm currently discarded by something that is supposed to keep me safe. Well, yeah, that's, as we said, the illusion of the safe society was merely an illusion. As I was saying a few days ago, embarrassed for us. No, I mean, don't be silly. It's not a move, it's a reality. Well, I suggest it's not a reality, it's a delusion. And you're probably embarrassing the fact that you have beautiful dark skin. Maybe you don't deserve it. But it's probably not your fault. It's more with resentment. I speak a lot about resentment. But go ahead, wage a war on everyone who's white, whether they're white Muslim, whether they're white liberals, whether they're white Polish, whether they're white Middle Eastern. I mean, allow your resentment to blind your judgment, and let's see how well it goes. Not quantum discussion today. No, unfortunately, my good friend Abyss. Today we are talking about societal collapse, and it's really funny. Because as I'm reading this book, we have people live actually reenacting past societal collapses without even realizing it. It's so funny. All right. I don't want to war against them. I just want them to go back to Europe and stay there. Well, you could also go to Africa if that helps you. I don't understand this logic. Yeah, history repeats itself. If they can go back to Europe, why are you on Periscope? Because you know that air conditioning, cars, electricity, all of that was invented by quote unquote white people. Maybe you can go back to, just lighting a fire. In fact, I think matches were invented by white people too. Yeah. So no, it's great. It's not their fault. It's a combination of ignorance, inculcation, indoctrination, and resentment. And it's very easy to turn your hate onto that. I mean, we saw it in the 50s in Russia when the peasants turned. He almost sounds like a kid, probably is. Culturally appropriating fire. Yeah, I love that stuff. It's like when you see the ISIS terrorists and they want to go back to the 7th century. I'm like, okay, well then give the guns back, give the gunpowder back. How about fuel? How about the distribution of fuel? If they get there too, well, you're giving white people the power if your decisions are based upon what they do. And which white people exactly are you against? Are you against the ones that were repressed in Eastern Europe by the Russians, or the ones that were oppressed in Western Europe by the Greeks, the Latins who were oppressed by the Greeks, or by the Southern Germans who were oppressed by the Norman Germans, or the British who were oppressed by the Romans? I mean, do you even know what drugs you're even smoking? Like, I mean, I don't blame you personally. It's not your fault that you're a moron. It's the fact that your education system is so unbelievably corrupt, and that is actually created by self-hating white people. So good luck with that. All right. Neither of those simply altered narratives are correct. Instead, if the society... I love trolls. They're the best. I love them. I don't know why we don't have enough. Conversely, it was able to survive. People need to get together. He doesn't deserve your knowledge. Well, I scoped exactly about this. It's very easy to predict people who are ideologically possessed in terms of their behavior, because they act exactly the way you would expect, because they're possessed by a virus. They're a zombie and they don't realize it. Why would they? The autistic truth can't be stopped. I love it. It's like, look at me now, right? Like, I'm semi-brown, and in the summer I'm going to go like almost as dark as chocolate. Does that mean my opinions change because I have more tan? I mean, news cycle, yeah. Yeah. What knowledge? Well, I rest my case, my friend. I am sorry that your potentially vast mind, and I enjoy all humans. That's a very terrible joke. Conversely, it was able to survive if self-inflicted forced depletion of climate change produced all for it. It was neither factor taken alone, but the combination of environmental impact and climate change that proves fatal. So look, if it helps you, here's an olive branch to this young genius. I guarantee you weren't abused by Anglo people or white people, even 0.1% that I was growing up. I guarantee you, right? Unless you were pissed on, right? Farted on, punched, besides a dildo. Wow. Well, I'm sorry that between your ears lies the atmosphere. They also invented language, genius, as well as the alphabet, as well as writing, which I believe you're trying to do right now. So as I said, I guarantee you, if you want to compete, they made my life a living hell infinitely more than you can even imagine, right? Probably because you haven't even been alive as long. And yet I don't hold that viewpoint. Now, why is that, right? Who knows? But maybe your resentment is clouding your judgment. He's not the sharpest pencil, no. He is so sharp, the pencil is coming out the other side, if you know what I mean. But I don't blame him. What choice, I mean, if you grow up without parents, or you just have one who's been molesting him, and then he goes to a school where the teachers are self-hating white people who get paid to prepare lessons, who don't prepare the lessons, who just take the money and be bludgers. What do you expect? Of course you're going to get indoctrinated young people who are zombies. You can only pity people like that. I really do feel bad. I wish I could take this young piece of shit and help, give him own personal Trump survival guide. I'm telling you now, it's not Trump. Trump is a manifestation of a deeper problem. If you guys think Trump is a problem, it's a big mistake, because if you get rid of Trump, you're going to get someone worse. I guarantee you. And we invented everything. I'll give y'all credit for making it better. Then again, y'all did kill us. You do realize that Mauritania is a black country and has hundreds of thousands of slaves right now, right? And that's in Africa. Why don't you go there and complain about that? Yeah. You do realize that Saudi Arabia has slaves, and they're all black slaves. And Saudi Arabians are Afro-Arab people. Okay. I don't think they're listening. Interesting. You also realize that North Africa had white slaves, and so America wiped them the fuck out during Thomas Jefferson's era, who was a slave owner as well. Yeah. Oh, it's all right. Logic doesn't work. Hey, Supernova's back. All right. A third consideration, some kid, yeah, it's all right. A third consideration is hostile neighbors. Look, I was like that when I was like 19. I remember being like pro, oh, I'm anti-white man, and I'm all for the Middle East. And hey, welcome back, my dear. Lovely to see you, man. Those shades are getting darker. Troll learns to read via periscope. Don't do shut, but make the world worse and lie about it. Well, there's a lot of white people here. It seems like you're the only one making the world worse at the moment, my friend. This is so much fun. Transition glasses. I love it. You go out in the sun and then take a photo with different transitions. That's just this white people business. What is this? I didn't even know that there were it's like one class of white person. How about the white person who tans more than the other? Are they all the same? I don't understand this fucking genius's logic. Oh my God. The proximate cause of the collapse. It's like when Hitler came in and was wiping out the Polish, he thought they were of a different race to him, but according to this genius, they're all white. What a fucking loser. The proximate cause of the collapse will then be military conquest. You ain't shit at the end of the day. No, they're not shit. They're successful. Leaving you to be a waste of space. Man, I'm telling you, that gorgeous black skin of yours really needs to go on someone with half a brain. Really, I think that would be an upgrade. The proximate cause of the collapse will then be military conquest, but the ultimate cause, fucking well, I know, eh? This guy, well, look, he's trying to practice. You picked the wrong place, man. The AI bot version 2.1, see? That's so good. One day AI will be able to troll better than all of us humans. That's actually true. I seriously reckon that. So I've spoken about this on GabSmack multiple times, and I spoke about this 3 months ago when I had like zero followers, right? You know, I had like before I even met Sprinkles and Booze, I think it was just like Michael and Alias and Posh Whisper, like 3 people. AI is probably already better than this dude, and they already have IQs of rats, so we're getting somewhere. Anywho, so I was saying 3 months ago, right, that I followed you. Yeah, you were pretty up there. I think you were one of the top 10, which is very, very humbling for me. You were like one of the gods coming to the mere mortals. Of course, they're going to be successful. They'll kill their 90-year-old grandparents over insurance. Man, I think you're confusing them with you and your grandmother. Jesus, cold-blooded. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's a problem, you know, all these either ignore or block him, it's getting boring. Yeah, I know, it's a bit of a cliche. That's a shame. I really hate blocking trolls. Yeah, I'll have to block him. That's a shame. All right, hence collapses for ecological or other reasons often masquerade as military defeats. Unbelievable. I think 700,000 quote unquote white people died freeing, you know, everyone else from slavery. Fucking idiot. Anyway, I don't know even why I defend whatever, who gives a shit. The most familiar debate, worst shit poster award goes to. All right, here we go. We're talking the most debatable was the Western Roman Empire, which was basically somewhere around 476. The Germans just walked in, right? They just opened the door for them. So as I said, Trump is a manifestation of a deep problem that has been in America since the beginning. And I spoke about this on Monday when I said that when Jefferson, right, bought up the rest of the land from the French because they were bankrupted after defeating Haiti, right? He threatened them and he said to them, if you don't sell me the rest of this American land, I will then turn against you and fight the British, because even though the British were against America, he decided he would fight with them if France didn't give him that land, even though France was defending him against the British because there was a civil war happening between France and Britain. Well, civil war, they used to be one country and then they split, and they've been having a civil war ever since. Anywho, they were one country after the Duke of Normandy took them over in 1066, but whatever. And then they revolted and became their own country, you know, after about whatever it was, 1200, I don't know the exact thing. Then hypocritically, they went and took over Scotland, and then Ireland, and then the rest of the world. Oh, man. All right. Where are we? So what happened was that because Jefferson was able to expand America overnight into like 4 times its size, they had no way to keep feeding the people. And to do that, what he did was, instead of importing the Germans who wanted to come over from Europe because they were being persecuted for their religious beliefs, he then decided to continue the reproduction of the slave trade across the southern states. And that one decision he made that was America's original sin. And America has been dealing with that ever since. So this idea that it's somehow come around with Trump is giving Trump undue power that he does not deserve. He is not that good. He is just he's brilliant at branding and hypnotizing and stuff. But his election was a manifestation of many, you mean the Protestantism? Yeah, absolutely. We had the Puritans who were flying through Germany, and you had the before the Treaty of Westphalia, and subsequent to that, we didn't even have the idea of the nation state, and that came after the Treaty of Westphalia, and we had the interreligious wars, and Prussia and it was persecuting its religious minorities, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire with its Catholicism, and now pushing the Protestants. It was a mess. So the Germans were strong, they were hard workers, they wanted to come to the US, and Thomas Paine, who came from the French Revolution into the American Revolution, the only person who was part of both revolutions, was basically stating, he saw this coming. He actually said, if you guys allow the sin of slavery to be reproduced across your states, you are going to have a blowback, right? And it's going to come at some time in the future. And he was exactly right about that, right? And Thomas Jefferson did it anyway, because for many reasons. Now, Thomas Jefferson, despite his sins of slave ownery and stuff like that, he was also at the same time a genius. They're both true, right? He could speak 9 languages. He was a freak of nature. He was able to wipe out, the original ISIS in North Africa, which was taking white people as slaves. They took 1.5 million white people as slaves during that time before the Barbary Wars. And without telling Congress, he sent the army, the navy over, and they completely decimated north of Africa and sent them back into the Dark Ages. So there's a lot of things that led to Trump, right? It's not one thing, and it's not Trump did this. No. And I said this on Monday, right? You guys know that I'm like a massive progressive, but because of certain things that happen in my life, I am very, 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 so I'm a free speech absolutist, right? And that means that you have to talk to people with whom you ideologically disagree. And so I watch Sean Hannity, who's one of the people I dislike more than anyone, but I do respect free speech, number one, and I respect that he's absolutely entitled to his opinions. So for that reason, I listen to him. And I'm telling you now, for the second 4 years of Obama's presidency, the frustration that was developing on the right, legitimate frustration, not because I agree with anything. Why do you dislike Hannity? I dislike him because I have a left-wing temperament. Do you have torches in your hand while you talk? Not sure if you are being serious or if you are really bad at making jokes, but we'll figure it out with more trolling. We'll see how we go. They created Donald Trump. Yes, they created that. So he's calling you a white supremacist. I'm a white supremacist. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yes, a Bernie Sanders supporter is a white supremacist from the Middle East. That's more genius. What is wrong with the IQ of Americans? I'm white all of a sudden. Yeah, I didn't know that this was white. Reference to demonstrations. Interesting. You advocate free speech. I advocate free speech without threatening people. Unlike Antifa. Anyway, so I'm not sure where free speech and threatening people are combined. The fact that you think that is quite interesting. It might be an authoritarian streak within you. Yes, why, thank you very much. Yeah, I know. I think my shirt is white. I didn't know that this and this were the same color. I'm not sure. But even if they were, who gives a shit? Like, why is that important? Yeah. Anyway, so getting back to what we were saying, there is genuine frustration. Sorry, to answer Lynn's thing, I don't like Sean Hannity because I don't like his temperament. Because I have a very left-wing temperament. So I just don't like his temperament at all. I don't like the way he's abrasive, the way he cuts off people, surrounded students while waving torches. Yeah, I think the fact that you don't realize that we realize this means I really recommend watching our past lectures first, because you sound articulate, so I don't want you to embarrass yourself any further. And it would be good to have more conversation with you when you come back. So anyway, so as we were saying, I respect his right to have a viewpoint. And of course, you want to know who your enemy is and where they are. Do you advocate violence as free speech? Maybe you should look up what free speech means, the word free and the word speech. I'm not sure if they are somehow related to violence. But look, there is a minimum IQ requirement to be here. I do discriminate against stupidity. So look, dissent is awesome. Stupidity, not really, not here. There are too many smart people. I don't want to waste their time. So yeah, that's going to really bring him on side, isn't it? So where were we? Talking about Hannity. Yes. So if half the country, controversial views, yes, that's exactly right. I'm happy I made the cut. You underestimate yourself way too much, Booze. Way too much. It bothers me. Just answer the question. I think you are misunderstanding me. Explain. Look, I can't slow down for everyone, unfortunately. Facts don't care about our feelings. But if you somehow think free speech and violence are related, then I would ask you to go back to the US Constitution. Because I'm not from America and yet I've read it. But I do appreciate your patience. You are actually quite articulate and potentially a pretty good guy to converse with. So I say that with respect. I don't mean any disrespect to you. Anyway, getting back to our conversation, there are people with different temperaments, okay, and psychologically there are reasons for that, and it is required so that we can see around our own biases. Now, we've been saying that for months. Okay, so when someone with whom you disagree has a legitimate gripe with what's going on with their country and condemn white supremacy, that's great. Well, welcome to the 21st century. I'm not sure, apart from the propagandist media who likes to create this 1 in a billion, I'm not sure who advocates supremacy of any particular genetic or DNA strand. But you know, you're a big boy. Well done. But look, it's not really your fault. It's a shame that we live now in an era where we have to come in. I'm trying to join the conversation. You're right. I was a little bit condescending, and that's because I was biased because there was some loser that came on here before and was like, you know, just saying shit, and then it put me in a bit of a bad mood. Yeah, a little bit. Supremacy and hierarchy are confused. Yeah. It looks like this is going to take over the conversation. So people with different temperaments who are naturally predisposed towards order and towards conscientiousness, the deep state. Yeah, well, you know, we don't live in a one variable universe. So as I would submit, it's probably you are right, Blazer Boy. I'm actually glad you spoke up because you are correct. And this is what I mean. This is why it's important to not block everyone with whom you disagree. Yeah, I mean, he started with carrying torches, that's true, which put me offside. Orchestrated conflict and then gave stand down order. And if you go further back, Trail Blazers fan, cool. I don't know what that means, but I don't know what Portland is. Is that Ohio or something? Comment on free speech. Okay, well, if you're accidentally conflating free speech and torches, then perhaps I was right to be condescending. Yeah. Anywho, so the point is, when you suppress legitimate views, which is what happens everywhere in the world. Oh, thank you. And as I've said, coming from the Middle East and witnessing this exact collapse, and now speaking about this from people who have researched this for many years, I did so poorly. All please forgive. Likewise, my friend, likewise. A combination of various things lead to certain outcomes. What they are. Your experience hasn't given you enough insight yet to fully understand what they are. No, I don't think anyone knows what they are. I think you're right that everyone has a different viewpoint, and when combined, it provides a much better solution. You're absolutely right, which is one of the reasons I love talking to conservatives, because we basically agree on nothing, and that is for me the most entertaining way to learn. Right? Why would any of us waste our time talking to those with whom we agree? I mean, it's not going to help us learn anything, right? So, is it plausible that, you know, after watching Mike Cernovich, once again, with someone I barely agree on anything, but the orchestration, I don't disagree with that. It's a very plausible hypothesis. But once again, we go further back than that. We say, why was it orchestrated? Why is there enough of an institution that can militarize itself to the point where it can orchestrate such an event? Why is it that these white people, or whatever this group is an egotistical narcissist? Yeah. You know, why... You're on fire today, Elbrooks. Why, for example, would these supposed right-wing people, or whoever they were that got in trouble, why would they succumb to that? And they would succumb to that exactly as I said, what happened in Lebanon in 1982, when the Christians who were attacked by the communists after 40 years and were attacked by them and the Islamists, snapped and just started slicing up liberal Christians and good Muslims, bad Muslims. They just started doing that. And then the country decays. And that's exactly what's been happening in the US for a long time. and it's been a ticking time bomb for quite a while. It was attempted to be suppressed by the beloved Obama, and in my opinion, my humble opinion, that was a mistake. And by suppressing it, it has created a counter-revolution, and that also happened in France during the 18th century and the 19th century when we had the Scott Adams comments on thought crimes. Yeah, I know, that was really good. Yeah. We had, for example, the collapse of the monarchy and the beheading of the king and his bitch wife, and then the rise of Maximilien, who was the most authoritarian leftist in human history, who was also then beheaded, and then we had the rise of Napoleon III, who was the equivalent of the Donald Trump of today. So this keeps happening, right? And humans, in all of their brilliance, seem not to learn and are hell-bent on repeating these mistakes. And so we see exactly what we were predicting in the past happen again. And this will keep happening as long as you want to suppress someone's view. You rule in fear of Islamic mob and not the citizenship. In Lebanon, I had a dream, I had your hair, it was nuts. Give it back. Yeah, like, so where does that all begin? Well, it begins, for example, I think that it began in Lebanon in 1893 when the population of the Christian / secular Western Hebrew Jewish, that was about 80%. It was 79%. And the society at that point was absolutely Western all the way. It was one of the most advanced economies in the world. It was stronger than almost all of Eastern Europe and a lot of Western Europe. And, you know, it was allies with Israel and, you know, all the stuff that you would expect from a Western-based country. Yeah, that's exactly my point on that one. Exactly. And the society 100 years back did not adequately look after its Islamic minority and oppress them, and not deliberately, but some of them feel oppressed rightly, but their response is incorrect. So when you're oppressed, for example, like, you know, I have family who was half Maronite and half Orthodox, and the Orthodox Christians on the reaction. Yeah. So for example, like the Orthodox Christians in Lebanon back in the day didn't get jobs over the Catholics, right? So, and it became heavily sectarian in that sense. Now, not all Orthodox turned resentful, but a lot did. And you can understand why that would happen. And that's happening now in the US, but instead of with religion, it's with race. So it's it's a neo-Marxist concept, which instead of religion or class, so it was originally class in the 40s, then turned religion in Lebanon in the 70s and 80s, and then in the West is now race, right? So we're seeing the exact, so what is proper rebellion after all? Well, if someone has the 4D ability to have a 4D horizon and understand that this has happened in the past, then they can prevent the same future from happening again. In a cartoonish way, resentment, yeah. And so resentment on the left causes, the resentment on my side, if fed healthily, can turn you into an authoritarian. And the authoritarian wants to suppress, you know, members of the right. Didn't just start. That's exactly right. That's exactly correct, my dear. Supernova is on the money, right? America was born with an original sin of racism. With the sin of religion. Well, specifically Lebanon and Israel, right? They were born with the sin of religion. America was born with the sin of race, right? Fine. Anyway, we also have the problem with the elites. This is correct. Where you have elites who have nothing but contempt for the middle class and use the lower class to destroy the middle class. Now, the middle class revolted in what you would call, ironically, a reverse Marxist movement. Right? So you had now the right, rising up against the left, right? Or the liberals on the left and right rising up against the authoritarians who were the elites, right? which is exactly what I've been saying for a long time, and that is evidenced by my blogs that I wrote before Trump was elected. I've said this many times. I said he was going to win. I put my savings on him. As much as I disliked the person, it was obvious to see that he was going to win, not because of him. It's yin yang over time. Yeah. Now, if we allow this back and forth to continue, then we're going to end up exactly like what Diamond is writing here with the collapse of Greenland, the Norse Greenland Empire, which killed itself exactly in the same civil war, and exactly what happened to Lebanon between 1975 to 1991. Completely decimated the country. It turned it from a first world country into a third world country. Now Lebanon's now back to a second world country, right? But you don't recover from stuff like that. You don't recover from the fact that your auntie was blown to pieces, right? And your neighbor's uncle was killed by someone in your family. You don't get past that, right? And that's what's happening in America now. And why, like Venezuela or South Africa? Yeah, exactly. Like South Africa is a perfect example. People with darker skin were suppressed. And what happened when you pull the pot off? Now every person who happens to have light skin is now getting slaughtered to pieces and raped and pillaged and destroyed. The casualties of war are permanent. Supernova with the memes. That's right, my friend. That's exactly right. So do we want to learn from this situation? Or do we want to, exactly what Boss Briggs said earlier, if she's still here to comment on what she said, yeah, which was that the statues, right, are representations of something that has not yet been dealt with in America. And until that is dealt with, I reckon you should have more statues, because Americans need to be reminded that they live in the sin of racism, right? And until they deal with it, right, getting rid of the statues only makes it worse. It's like someone who's really ugly and goes and gets plastic surgery to look like a celebrity, right? How can the USA avoid becoming South Africa? Number one, constant reminders. Number two, talking about it. I actually think as horrible as I find Trump, I actually am relieved in a way that he was elected, because I've said this before. If he wasn't elected, it would have been Ted Cruz. And I'm telling you now, you don't want Ted Cruz. He is 100,000 times more of a dictator than Trump, right? And if Ted Cruz gets squashed by the authoritarians on the left, the next person is going to be even worse. And you're just going to keep getting someone worse and worse and worse until the problem is dealt with. Yeah, and ironically, a Nazi is a National Socialist. It is Trump or nobody. Exactly. Has a racist state flag over. Exactly. It's the Confederate flag, right? For example, to me, right, it's horrific. But my response, because I'm a liberal, but I'm a progressive liberal, not an authoritarian. My response is to keep it up so that we keep talking about the problem, right? We need to realize that if my brother who has darker skin is suffering, then I'm suffering. And if my brother who has lighter skin is suffering, then I'm suffering. And same with sister, obviously, right? Until we think like that, and that is more of a communitarian-based ethical system, and we need to include that, my submission, in the society of the US at the moment. Our state has suffered enough. I demand to have a piece of Statue of Liberty when you all are removing her. Yeah, I mean, what's next? Do you remove the Stalin statue? There's racism, there's racism. Yeah, like for me, right, I am glad that in a way that racists have a platform, right? And someone's going to take that out of context. But I'm glad that they have a platform because I want to know where they are. I want to know who these pieces of shit are so that they're not hiding underground. And all that authoritarianism does is hide it underground. Now, I'll give you an example. When I was living in Syria, right? Now, like many of you on my other channel know that I was in Syria, and you know that I was arrested, one time, and another time I had to get out, and right. So I know what it's like to live under an actual authoritarian regime. Yeah. Well, it's only going to exacerbate the problem, right? And for those of you who still don't know me or haven't pre-ordered the book or whatever, I lived in Syria under that regime. And many of us were atheists in Syria, or religious minorities. How do we get neo-Stalinism? I'll tell you in a second. Let me hold that thought. That's a good one. All right. So, when I was in Syria, we had to sneak into places to be able to watch or read Facebook, right? And we had to have people watching at the door. And even then, you don't know if one of your friends is going to rat you out under torture. You don't know. Okay. So this is what it's like to live in Syria, right? I'm not kidding you. I'm not exaggerating. That is exactly what it's like to live in Syria. And then if someone doesn't like you, they can rat on you and they can make up stuff, but then you're targeted. It's actually happening now in Australia and in America as well, but in Syria, it's much worse. Now, why did that start? That started in Syria because you had Islamic extremists, right? And then you had communists who supported them. Then you had people who were freedom of speech and other religious minorities. And because they all started fractionating and dissolving into civil war, Bashar al-Assad's father rose to power and massacred and butchered everyone who spoke out. So basically, if any of us, like I've got a little bit of perspective, a different perspective than everyone here in the sense that I've seen what it's like to have a real dictator. So when I look at Trump, I just laugh because I'm like, you know what? Trump is like a nice little boy compared to these dictators that I've seen, right? And that's where America will keep heading as long as the intergroups fight. So what holds a country together? Either you have common values and common language, or you have a dictator, one or the other, right? It's not both. And that's how you stop a dictator from rising. That's how you stop future people from rising. That is why people on the right, a lot of people here are on the right, and a lot of my top supporters are on the right. And we know that we don't agree on anything, but I tell you now, they are the most beautiful people I've ever met, right? I like you right back. I'm telling you now, there are, so-called white Christians who are, I'm telling you now, the best people I've ever met, ever. You're not on the right. Well, maybe you're not, but those who, okay, let me we agree more. It's true. We do agree a lot. We agree on freedom of speech, on freedom of religion, of respecting each other when speaking out. Yeah, that can happen. So anyway, if you look at it that way, which is a lot more complicated, right, and requires a little bit of intellect and deep thought and the resistance to fall to your natural biases, right? If people were to think that way, then you would eliminate, for the most part, all of these ridiculous Stalinists and Nazis and all these maniacs, right, who are trying to hold on to something because everything else around them is collapsing and they don't have the intellect nor the education nor the support system in their community to think and critically think, right, like what we're doing now. Anyway, that's my answer. I think that ends this lecture. I was supposed to read about the collapse of another society. A bit of a non sequitur, yeah. Look, you're exactly right. And humans are the reason that we have a cyclical nature because, people forget, they kill each other, and then the idea of the West moves, it modulates. It started in Sumer, Babylonia, the Phoenicians, then the Greeks, then the Romans, then the British, and then it moved to the New World, which is America, and now it's collapsing from there. It's rising in China and then India. It just keeps going around. And I think that has something to do with the fact that we have it easy. Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, it's completely unplanned. I was going to talk about another society, and in the end, we talked about the American one. But it's the same thing. Same thing. Anyway, love you guys, man. Gabversity, I understand you. I better understand you now. Cool. Thank you. The problem you say that blacks have not arrived by free will. There's another point to that. No one arrived by free will in America. That's my argument is that no one arrived by free will. Everyone who's born there today did not choose to be born there, right? Even refugees or my family some of my family sought asylum in America 30 years ago. The question is, do you fall into your resentment or do you decide to make yourself a better person? And the only way for America to fix itself is by each individual deciding to make themselves a better person. Tomorrow they're like, you know what? I'm gonna join a right-wing group and I'm gonna find some decent people there, right? And Jennifer did that. Jennifer's might be a Trump supporter, blacks always play the victim. See, you're generalizing. Blacks don't always play the victim. People who play the victim. Some happen to be white, some happen to have black skin. So it is, Supernova doesn't. Supernova's freaking awesome. is different than free will to immigrate, matter of passion. You're right. And I'm actually a massive supporter of reparations in a certain way, which most people don't agree with me on. And that's a whole other topic that we'll talk about another time. All right. So yeah, Boss Briggs is a Trump supporter, and she went out of her way to find people of different races, different religions. And my respect for her is through the roof. I'm telling you, there are people on my side who are nothing compared to her. And so that's what I mean. We interlock with each other, and that is the way to truly make America great. Yeah, likewise. I'm really glad you guys brought it up, actually. I have to thank the trolls. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have been talking about this. So I'm mad thank you to them. No way to measure, huh? I think that'll be another topic. I'm going to talk about the collapse of another society tomorrow, and you will see very similar traits with what's happening in the US. But we'll get to that. Facts don't give a shit about any of our feelings, my friends. Gabversity.